Welcome to another edition of the SprintCarUnlimited.com Deep Dive presented by EnTrust IT Solutions. Joining us on this week's show is High Limit Racing announcer Chase Raudman. Before we get to Chase, don't forget to check out EnTrust IT Solutions. EnTrust is a full-service technology company serving small and mid-sized businesses in New York, Pennsylvania, and surrounding areas. The staff at EnTrust takes a personalized approach to technology. See why customers are choosing EnTrust IT Solutions as their technology partner by scheduling a free consultation at www.entrust-msp.com or by calling 717-292-8868. Now here's Chase. Chase, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on here, man.
No problem. I know you. I had you on the podcast a couple of years ago. It was really good, but I want to kind of bring people up to speed, kind of on a free platform. And I think the first thing is, how did you get into any kind of announcing / pit reporting, all the stuff you do? What was kind of your first job or first foray into that medium?
Well, the first time I was ever on a microphone, so to say, was actually in fourth grade. I was actually thinking about this not too long ago that, back in the day, I don't know, maybe back in your day it was a little different there, Jeremy, but we also used to have the Christmas, the Christmas show, or whatever it was called.
Yep.
in elementary school, where everybody'd go in the play and they'd sing and all that stuff, right? And everybody be the Nutcracker and the Gingerbread Man, whatever. Fourth and fifth grade, I was actually the narrator for the play. So I remember back in the day, I was pretty good at reading. Spelling was always one of my really good subjects as well. And so I don't know how it happened. Obviously, it was a long time ago, but I was always the narrator for the Christmas play, and they had a Thanksgiving play as well at my school. So that was the first time I'd ever on a microphone. Obviously, it's a little bit different. There was no live stream and all that stuff, and blah blah blah. But I guess 2015 was when I first really was exposed to it a lot with the racing world. I had just quote unquote quit racing. I wasn't very good, so I decided I want to do something different. But it was the Red Bluff Outlaws, which is outlaw kart track in California, where Larson and Rico and Thorson and Tanner Holmes, Landon Brooks, all those guys began their careers on the outlaw kart side of things. And I was there doing some social media stuff and just kind of hanging out with my buddies and stuff after I stopped racing. And then the promoter knew me pretty well because I'd been racing there for the couple of years prior to that. He kind of knew I was a little outgoing and stuff like that. So one weekend, the announcer there, who still is the announcer there, Elijah Jones, he does some stuff at Silver Dollar Speedway as well. But he was getting married. One weekend it was his bachelor party. The next weekend he was getting married. And then they asked me, hey, you want to, fill in here for these 2 nights? And then, after that, you're out. Like, he's got to come back and be the announcer. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll try it out. And one of the things that was going on at the same time when I did that was Kyler Shaw with fast4media.com, which is it's a, lower, it's not like Flow. It's not like Dirt Vision, right? It's a smaller streaming platform that does outlaw cars, micros. He used to have the Sprint Car Challenge Tour. But he just started filming and started doing, highlight videos and started doing some live streaming stuff there around the same time that I did those 2 races. And I came in, I did the first 2, and he's like, man, you're kind of good at this. You should, what do you think about going to a couple of these other races with me? And I'm like, I don't care. I'm in college at this point, I believe 2015. Yeah, I was in college at this point. And so that year, we went to Idaho, we went to Montana, we went to Deming Speedway in Washington, Arizona, bunch of tracks in California and Oregon as well. And I did a bunch of those races. And then after that, it kind of, snowballed there. And my career really, kind of jumped pretty quickly right after that. The first really big race that I did actually was the Indy Invitational, which, it turned out to be a complete disaster, right? But it was a big deal when it was going on. The inside the Bankers Life Fieldhouse, midgets and outlaw karts, right? There was a lot of really good drivers there. And I got asked to do that. I did that with Blake Anderson and Bob Dillner. And that was kind of my first really big race. But then, things kind of cooled off a little bit after that. But one thing I always tell everybody is as an announcer, most of the time you can't really, go back and critique yourself and hear yourself. But My very first race I ever announced is on YouTube. Like, go back and watch it right now and just make fun of me the whole time, which is what I do every now and again. I'm like, man, what the hell was I doing? But that's something that is pretty unique. I might have to share the link to that someday. But yeah, so that's basically how I got my start as far as announcing races.
So you actually started in the booth.
I did. Yeah, I started in the booth, and I mean, I was outlaw carts, right? It wasn't like I was doing sprint cars or anything like that, right? It took me probably 2 years to actually announce my first ever sprint car race. I'd actually met Tim Truex, who at the time was the loud pedal guy, and he, at the time he was doing all of his cool videos, right? The Eastern Storm one, the Chili Bowl videos, all that stuff, and he'd actually came to so Larson used to have a big race at Cycleland Speedway, which is the other track in Northern California. But, along with Red Bluff, the races in the summertime, Larson used to have this big race called Kyle Larson's Outlaw Kart Showcase. And his dad, Mike, had, picked me to be the pit reporter for that race. And like the first year, dude, it was like the craziest. It was like every California sprint car guy in the country was racing an outlaw kart. There was like 8 World of Outlaws guys there, a bunch of USAC midget guys. It was like 150 cars in one class, and they were all, just Jack Hodenshield was racing. Like, it was a crazy field, right? And I did the pit reporting for that race. And I believe that was the first time I'd actually met Tim Truex in person. And he's like, man, we need to try and get you on some sprint car stuff, right? Like some non-wing, some midget stuff. And I was like, okay, just, let me know on that. That'd be great. And then I believe it was 2017, maybe 18. I announced my first ever sprint car race at Colorado Speedway in Hanford, California. I can't remember if it was the California Sprint Week show or not, but it was non-wing cars. I honestly couldn't remember who won. Maybe Damian Gardner won or something. He won every race back then. But that was the first race I'd ever announced a sprint car. That was like 2017 maybe. But yeah, I started out of the booth, and then I really didn't do the pit reporting thing until the Outlaw deal came around.
So how do you end up doing pit reporting for the Outlaws? And that's significantly different, which we'll get into in a second. But how do you end up with the World Racing Group?
Yeah, COVID, COVID obviously was a bad deal for a lot of people. And, people in my family as well were affected by COVID a lot. But, COVID for me, like, it actually boosted my career to what it is now, right? I mean, when COVID came around, the iRacing deal became a huge deal, right? And I was already doing iRacing, announcing iRacing stuff. They have a pro series on there that, pays like, was it like 10 grand to the champion or something like that? And I was kind of doing that stuff that, like, directly employed, I guess you could say, by iRacing to do these pro series races. And I knew some guys that worked for WRG at the time, just doing, online racing, right? Like R Factor and iRacing. I met a bunch of people that worked there from that. And the main one was probably Ross Weiss, right? And when COVID came around, the Outlaws started doing their own, invitational series where all the Outlaw guys and a bunch of, regional guys that race with the Outlaws, they'd run their races on there. And that was kind of getting them by when they didn't have any real racing going on. There was real money being paid out and all this stuff, right? And Johnny Gibson was the announcer for it. But Johnny had no idea what was going on when it came to iRacing, right? He's like, the problem with Johnny is he didn't actually have iRacing. He was watching a production feed, right? And when you go from announcing and being able to look around the track and see what's going on to just looking at one screen, you can't move any cameras around or anything like that. You don't know how the scoring works. It was a big adjustment for him. And so they wanted somebody else to come in that, knew the drivers, knew iRacing, how it worked, all that stuff, right? And so they're like, hey, let's try and get Chase on here to help out Johnny, right? And Ross was a big part of that because I just known him in the past, and he kind of knew that I was doing some announcing and things like that, right? And so, I did a couple of races with Johnny, and it was pretty fun because it was just so much different from what he's used to, right? And, Johnny's like, in my opinion, he's the best of all time, right? But like for him trying to do the announcing for the iRacing stuff, it was pretty funny. But I was able to help him out a lot, I feel like, for that type of thing with the scoring and, going back through the field and trying to find different battles that were going on and stuff like that. And then they started doing races on CBS. And I was kind of a guy in the background. I don't know what they actually called me, like a production assistant maybe, but I was like helping them like in the background of the CBS broadcast, like finding battles to watch and like, hey, check out fourth place, these guys are going at it, and so that was kind of my first, I guess, step into working working, quote unquote, for World Racing Group. I'd get a check. And this was during COVID. I had no job, right? I was sitting at home all day. All day I was sitting home on iRacing, and I was doing these races, and I get a check every week or so for like $300 from World Racing Group, right?
Huh.
And that was my job at the time. But yeah, that was how I first got into the Outlaws, right? And then after COVID was over, I was in Indiana one night racing, or not racing, but working for Fast Four Media for a big micro race. It was the man, what was it called? It was at Southern Illinois Raceway, or no, it was at it was at Circus City Speedway. I can't remember the name of the race, but it was a big race. It was like 10,000 to win or something for non-wing micros, and it was in Indiana. And the Outlaws were racing at Terre Haute, and the race I was at was running on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then the next week, we were going to stay out there because there's another big race going on. And so on that Sunday, the Outlaws were at Terre Haute, and I had texted Brian Dunlap or Ross Beach. I think it was Dunlap. And I said, hey, I've been watching the Outlaws, obviously for a long time, but I've been watching them a lot there recently when they got back going. And I noticed that they didn't really have a pit reporter that was there for every race. They kind of had somebody different come in, right? Like Dave Reef was in there. Michaela Dumpsey was the announcer or the pit reporter for a couple races, and some other guys here and there. And I noticed that they didn't have anybody that was there every race. And I texted Dunlap. I said, hey, man, like I'm like 3 hours away from Terre Haute. If I got a ride there, would you guys have any interest in me pit reporting the race? And he said, yeah, let's give it a shot. I was like, okay, I didn't even know how much it paid, do nothing, right? I was like, I'm just going to do this because, wow, this is like the biggest opportunity in my entire life, right? And so I showed up. I got a ride from Max Adams, who runs non-wing sprint cars in Indiana now. He gave me a ride there, and I had no idea what was going on. I showed up. I met Hank Silver, who used to be the producer for all the shows there, Jackson Steele, who still works there now, a couple other people. I met Johnny for the first time, like actually meeting him. I'd actually worked with Johnny before at the Las Vegas dirt track. I announced alongside of him for the non-wing sprint cars when the Outlaws were there. But that was the first time like meeting, hey, Johnny, oh, hey, we're going to work together, right? I got the goofy looking clown shirt on with the red and the old Dirt Vision shirts. They look like you were a carny at a carnival or something, right? I had a weird hat on, all this stuff, right? But yeah, that was the first time I went to Terre Haute. And that night, it was the craziest race ever. Like Brad Sweet was leading the points, but he ended up crashing like 3 times. Craig Kinzer flipped in qualifying. Carson Macedo, he hit the inside wall and bounced all over the place. Donnie Schatz blew a motor in qualifying, came from dead last to second. Like I got a bunch of TV time that night at Terre Haute, and that was kind of my really big break, I guess you'd say. And then things kind of snowballed from there.
Oh, is that when you talked to Donnie and he was like really pissed that he talked to you?
That was the I guess, like, honestly, looking back on that, like when it first happened, I was like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot, dude. I don't even, and that was my first time like major pit reporting, right? And I was nervous, obviously. I was nervous to talk to Donnie Schatz for the first time ever. And I just wouldn't shut up, dude. I asked him like a question that was 8 minutes long under an open red, and I just wouldn't shut up. And then he finally, said what he said. And looking back on it, it made me help me because people were like, who is this? Who is this guy? Chase, whatever. Chase Raudman. Who is this guy, right? And it turned out to be a pretty funny thing. And I think it may have honestly helped me a little bit because more people were like, who the hell is this guy, right? But I got a lot of TV time that night. And the guys at World Racing Group, asked me to do it again a few nights later at Attica. And they called me and said, hey, what are you doing next week? You want to go to Williams Grove? And I was like, well, fuck, I ain't doing anything. Let's go. Let's do it. So that was kind of how it all started.
Well, and I'm sure Donnie got over it.
He did. Yeah, we're friends now. So that's, but every now and again, he lets me know about it.
Oh, well, that's Donnie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've often said I feel pit reporting's harder because you never know when it's getting thrown to you. You don't have a bunch of notes in front of you. You don't have the luxuries of a booth where you can have notes and kind of a controlled environment. So you have the elements. How difficult is pit reporting? Is it the most difficult reporting you've done or broadcasting you've done in your career?
I mean, obviously it's very tough. And people, and there's different styles, right? Like my style that I did for the pit reporting stuff was more analytical, more stat based, more asking drivers questions about what the track's doing and how their cars are reacting and things like that. That was the things that I was interested in and the things that I felt like I had the most knowledge about. When you look at Tony Laporta's style, it's way different, right? He's more like personable with drivers, and he's, asking them, just random questions, right? That like get some personality out of them, right? That wasn't kind of my style, right? But I would say, yeah, honestly, and maybe you could ask me this like 4 years in the future, right? But like for me, this year, it's been, in my opinion, at least for me, it's been way harder to announce, right? There's just so much going on all at the same time, and you got to be talking all the, like, you got to be entertaining the entire time. You always got to be talking. You don't want to have any dead air. There's so many things going on at the same time. I got, Mike Hess yelling at me from across the booth. I got Tyler McKim talking to me in my ear. Hey, we're going to commercial. Hey, do this. I got Tony trying to, get his microphone going and think there's just so much going on at the same time. I got like a screen over here with timing, in case Kendra Jacobs needs to text me. I got my phone sitting over here. I just got a bunch of stuff going on all at the same time. And I didn't realize that was the case when I took the job, right? There is so much going on. There's so much responsibility. And I have never been good at multitasking, but I had to learn really quickly this year that I need to get better at it because there's just so much that is going on. So for me, I think the announcing's tougher, but ask me in 3 years, maybe once I have a like a format, once I have like my bearings under me, because I still feel like I'm still trying to figure this all out, right? I mean, we're 45 races in,
Right.
which compared to Johnny, who's been 30 years, Blake Anderson 10 years, all that stuff, right? I mean, those guys had it down to a science, right? I'm still over here pouring liquid in the test tubes and stuff, trying to figure out what's working and how to do it and all that stuff, right? So for me, the announcing's tougher, but the peer reporting is certainly tough. And for anybody that can do it and do it well, like looking into the camera and not making it awkward to watch on the broadcast, that was one of the things that like I was making sure of. Like, I don't want people to watch the broadcast and like be third hand awkward, like feeling awkward watching. I want them to like feel like I'm there with them, talking to them, like at the, sitting on the couch with them, right? And that was something I was very concerned with, was just making sure that when I'm talking on the screen, nobody at home is watching like, oh God, did he just say that? Or why is he looking at me like that? Or, just, I want to be normal, right?
Well, one of the things I notice, I know, I don't know, maybe I'm creepy, but I watch people because well, that's kind of my job, to kind of observe and then go through the bodies at the bottom of the hill. But beside the point, like I watched you at Williams Grove one night. You're really good at, you don't stammer, it's something that just seemed really natural to you. And I know when I had you on the podcast, I talked about that, and not having notes and just not knowing when somebody was going to go to you. I mean, it might be, you might not get many looks during a night. And then there's nights like the one at Terre Haute where you were on camera a lot. So when you take the job at first off, what made you go to High Limit? Because let's face it, World Racing Group and the World of Outlaws, you were the guy and you did it well. You settled into a comfortable position. What makes you take on this challenge of going to the booth at High Limit?
Well, I guess I'd always wanted to be an announcer, right? That's kind of where like I told you, that's where I started at, doing go-karts and stuff like that, right? That's where I wanted to be at. And I knew that it was going to be very difficult, especially in this day and age with social media, and
Yeah.
every word that you say is recorded and all that stuff, right? And people are going to criticize you. And let's face it, man, I learned a long time ago, which is, I'm glad I did. Like when I was doing USAC stuff on the West Coast, I learned that you're not going to please everybody in this job, right? There's no way. You could be literally the greatest of all time, and people are still going to not like you because they just don't, right? Some guy tweeted me the other day and was like, Chase Raudman's like listening to Chris Collinsworth. And I'm like, well, I don't really watch football, but I don't know. Is Collinsworth bad? Is he good? I have no idea. But
By the way, he's one of my favorite, and I'll tell you
no,
why. Because he actually says something. He doesn't point out the obvious and go, well, you can't miss that tackle. Yeah, no kidding. We know that. I like Chris Collinsworth, but a lot of people don't, because he can be critical. I'm okay with it. So if you're called Chris Collinsworth, to me, that's good.
Well, there you go. See, like I said, I don't really watch any football very much, so I wasn't sure if that was a good or a bad thing. But I know that he's a professional and does it for the NFL, so he must be doing something right, So, but yeah, I mean, I always wanted to be the announcer, right? That was a big goal for me. And before I got to High Limit, to be honest with you, man, I'd only announced, I would say, 7, maybe pushing maybe like 9 wing sprint car races ever. Like, and a lot of them were 360 races, right? I did a couple of 410 wing shows, and that was it, right? And the last 3 years before High Limit, I was announcing like 2 races a year, 3 maybe, and they were go-kart races, right? I was never doing any announcing because I was the outlaw guy, right? And I was, I'm not getting a bunch of opportunities. And if like somebody from Flow calls and says, hey, you want to come do this race down here? Well, I work for Dirt Vision, so I can't really do that. You know what I'm saying? So I was worried, right? But that was something I've always wanted to do, was be an announcer for a touring wing sprint car series. And obviously, there isn't many opportunities for that. There's 2 wing sprint car national tours in the country, right? So, and we already know the other one is got a guy for what seems like a long time. And then so then I guess how it all came about really was, I had been hearing, when you're in the trenches, right? Like,
Yep.
like when you're at the track and you're in the pits and you're hearing all these rumors and things like that, right? I heard this rumor about High Limit going on a national tour, 60 races, blah, 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 right? It really expanding their schedule. And then I kind of heard some things that, hey, well, it sounds like this guy is not going to do it because he has this job, and this guy can't do it because he's got a family and he can't travel and stuff, right? And we were at Port Royal for the Nittany Showdown. And I think Larson was there for just one of the nights. Maybe he only showed up for one night. Maybe he was there for both. I can't remember. But I texted him like that the week before, maybe, or 2 weeks before, and I just said, hey, and he's always liked my announcing. He always makes fun of me when the we got him racked and we got him stacked thing, right? And I just texted him. I said, hey, we got him racked and stacked next year, with a little microphone emoji, and that was all I said. And he responded and said, I'll talk to Brad about it or something like that. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I got my, I at least put in my resume or my, my job application, just send them that text, right? And I'm not doing anything else. I was happy where I was at, right? I'm doing the Outlaws, man. I mean, it's awesome, right? I was happy with what I was doing, but if that opportunity did come about, I was going to have to do some serious thinking, right? So then later, like I said, like 2 weeks later, I was at Port Royal, and Larson was, out by turn 4 looking at the track on his bike or whatever. And he turned around and he came, he's riding towards me. And I said, hey, I don't know. Did you ever send that text to Brad? And he's like, oh yeah, I sent it to him. And, we're talking and we're thinking about, some stuff and what we're going to figure out and all this stuff. And I was like, all right, and then I didn't message him, didn't message Brad, didn't message whoever for, 2 or 3 months. Right. And that was when's the Nittany Showdown? Was that usually
It's October.
October, right? So like October. So I didn't message anybody for weeks. And then, I'm hearing all these rumors like, hey, this guy can't do it and this guy can't do it, but this guy's putting his hat in the ring to try and be the announcer, right? And I'm, like I said, I'm still fine. I'm the World of Outlaws pit reporter. I do not need this job, right? And then I want to say it was Thanksgiving Day or the day after or the day before. It was like right in there. Mike Hess had called me, and I was like, why is Mike, like, what is Mike doing? Like, obviously, this is after he left the Outlaws to go High Limit, right? And he calls me and he's like, hey, what are you doing next year? I'm like, Mike, you know what I'm doing next year. Come on. Like, you know what my job is. Come on, He's like, well, Kyle really, Kyle's been really talking about having you be the announcer this year. And Brad seems to be on it. And JP kind of, whatever and stuff. And I'm like, dude, are you like, you're not kidding right now. You're being dead serious. He's like, yeah, they are really thinking about you. And I was like, okay, man, that's cool to hear. He's like, yeah. And then this guy can't do it. This guy can't, like, I was like the 9th string, right? It's like The Longest Yard, that Adam Sandler movie when Bruce comes, man, and he's like the 20th string quarterback, right? Like, that was me. I'm not ashamed to admit it, man. I was the 19th string announcer that they had for High Limit because there's just too many guys that couldn't do it or they had previous gigs or whatever, right? And so I told Mike, I was like, man, I really need to think about it. I'm not going to tell you yes right now on Thanksgiving Day or whatever it is. But, I'll get back to you and let you know, because this is going to take some serious thoughts and, all the stuff. Right. And then from that day forward, for like 2 weeks, dude, I called everybody in my phone book 302 times. I was calling everybody. I'm sorry I didn't call you, Jeremy. I don't think I had your phone for them. I was calling everybody. I was like, dude, what do you think? What do you think? What about this? What about that? I was just like going every scenario in my head. And and it was a long process, man. I was going back and forth with WRG, and, they were trying to get me in the tower with Johnny to try and compensate for, that job. Like, hey, well, if you want to do that, we can get you in the booth with Johnny and this, all that. And then I finally just said, I was like, this is too good of an opportunity to pass up. Right. And a lot of people said that I was a sellout and I only did it for the money and this. And of course, right, I could have stayed at WRG and made more money. I took essentially a pay cut, right, to go to High Limit and do what I'm doing now because of the opportunity to be the announcer on a national touring series, right? And I'm glad I did. Now that I think about it, I'm like, man, why was that such a big, choice for me to do it? Because now I look back on it, I'm like, man, this has been so much fun. It's been, obviously a roller coaster ride. We're going to freaking Australia. We've had fantastic racing all year. We've got a great group of cars and drivers and a great staff and everything that's involved with it, right? And now I think about it, I'm like, man, I can't believe for 2 weeks I was pulling my hair out trying to make sure I made the right decision, right? Because I feel like at this point, I feel like I made the correct decision to do what I'm doing now, and I don't regret it at all.
Well, I think it's easy. I mean, when you ask yourself why was it so difficult? I mean, let's face it, you were established there, you were in a groove, payment, everything was going good. If things are going good, what's the reason to move? So I can understand why that was a hard choice. Okay, you're into this thing now, obviously since February, down at East Bay. Do you listen to your East Bay stuff? And now, how do you? I mean, I know for me, it's difficult for me to read stuff that I wrote back in 1998. Do you listen? Do you kind of go, good God, no wonder I got that text on social media, which I'll get to in a minute. But do you kind of look back and go, boy, I've come a long way? Or is it still a struggle at times to kind of adapt to this?
Oh, it's still a struggle to this day, man. I mean, but like I hadn't watched East Bay until and I only watched like 10 or 15 minutes of it. I watched like hot laps and qualifying, right?
Yeah.
But some guy that came up to me at the track and was like, man, you've came such a long way from East Bay. I'm like, I have. And he's like, dude, you got to go back and watch it. And so I got home and I was like, okay, I'll watch like hot laps. And I was like, and let me tell you, dude, when we were at East Bay, I was shitting my pants, dude. Like obviously it was already a huge deal. Kyle Larson, Brad Sweet, new series. It's gonna be awesome, this and that. And I'm the guy that has to entertain everybody, right? And that's my job, and to bring good information and all the stuff, right? I'm already shitting my pants. And then we get there, and like I thought I was so prepared, dude. I'm over here typing up all my notes and everything, and I'm dialed in. I get there, my entry list had like 32 cars on it. We get there and there's 58 cars, and I had to go through and we got there at like 11 o'clock in the morning to the track, and dude, for I don't even know, like 3 hours, more than that, when cars finally started rolling in at 1 p.m., I'm at every trailer getting sponsors, getting information, all this stuff, and I'm losing my mind. I don't know where the printer's at because it's the first race. Where's the printer at? How do I print this off? What do I do here? What do I do there? All this, right? And I finally get to the tower and I'm out of breath, dude, and I'm freaking like just my brain is fried from all this information. And by the time I got to the tower, it's like, hey, we're live in 10 minutes. I'm like, okay, and we're gonna put you on camera. Oh, okay. Well, I've been on camera a bunch, but for this, like, how many people are watching this right now? I want to say it was in the middle of the week. It was like a Monday, maybe, or a Tuesday. So that everybody's gonna be. It was a Sunday. I think it was a Monday.
It was Monday.
Everybody's gonna be watching on a Monday, and here I am, on camera for the first High Limit race, and I look like an idiot. I'm nervous. I'm trying to read off a paper that I printed off right in front of the camera. I have it taped below the camera just because I'm just trying to make it through the first two nights, right? Because I mean, there was just so much going on, and I was nervous. And I look back on it, I just didn't sound confident, I feel like, at all in what I was saying. I was just obviously nervous. I had never been that nervous for a broadcast, probably ever, even for the Knoxville Nationals, right? And as a pit reporter, it's a little bit different, right? But that was the most nervous I'd ever been for any broadcast ever at East Bay. And luckily, a huge deal was us raining out that night, because then I was able to calm down. I had all my stuff for the next day. Let's retry it tomorrow. Like, that rain out was so big for me to go home and just kind of relax and, look over all my stuff and get dialed in for the next day and not have to worry about running through the pits for 3 hours, trying to get all my information ready to go. But yeah, I mean, I look back on it and I'm like, man, dude, like, why did I say that? Or what was I doing there? Like, why do I sound like I don't know what I'm doing? I don't know. Like maybe I still do sound like that, but it's still a challenge to this day to get everything right. I mean, obviously I've come, I would say in my opinion, I feel like I've come a long ways, but the main problem for me all year has been just keeping my voice around for the entire night, especially when there's 45 cars in the pit area, right?
Right.
And when we raced for 4 nights in a row, like we did on the West Coast, dude, by the time I got to Saturday at Skagit, dude, my throat, like around like right here, was like hurting. It was like pulsating. It was like I just was I was on the chip for 4 nights in a row, right? And that's something that I missed out on it, but I had a appointment with an ear, nose, and throat doctor this week, and I got back from Port Royal and I accidentally overslept on Monday and missed my appointment. Right, I got to make another one. But like I've been using, look at this. I mean, I got this thing right here. I got a personal face steamer right here to try and get more, you know, moisture into my throat. I got one of these guys, these neti pots, you know, put in your nose and you try and get all the mucus out. Dude, I've tried all kinds of remedies and stuff, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've spent hundreds of dollars trying to get all different things, like different cough drops that are made for singers. And, you know, I got what's it called? It kind of looks like the face steamer, but it's one of those big, like,
Right.
I don't remember what it's called, but, you know, it's like a thing that puts air or water in the air in a room and all, right? I've done
Oh,
all kinds of,
humidifier.
right? Yeah, that's exactly humidifier. Yep. But the main thing that I found is just drinking a bunch of water seems to be the main. And dude, when I got done with that first race at East Bay, I looked on the ground and there had to be 12 bottles of water on the ground around my feet. I was just drinking them every time I could to try and get my voice to go through. So, but yeah, I've watched the East Bay thing, man, and I look back on it and I'm like, well, you got to start somewhere, right? I mean, that's kind of what I think about it.
What's the biggest improvement for you in your mind? What is your biggest improvement from when you started to now?
The biggest improvement, I think that like being able to put a whole show together is obviously very important and not, I don't know. That's a good question because at the beginning of the year, I felt like I didn't really have a rhythm, right? I didn't really know.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, okay, we're done with hot laps. Now let's get into qualifying. And, well, I don't have my stuff all put together. And now I got to look over, like, you know, I just wasn't prepared at all. I had no prep. Like I felt like I was prepared with my notes and everything, but the preparation for all the other stuff that goes along with it, like trying to keep a full show going on the whole night was definitely a struggle. But I feel like I've gotten better at that, which is a big improvement. And also just being more confident in what I'm saying. Because I don't want people to, you know, be watching and think, well, this guy doesn't sound like he knows what he's talking about, right? But
Right.
like I do have a good grasp on sprint car racing and the drivers and the teams and all that stuff. But being more confident has been a big thing for me as well. And just getting more confident in my race call too. Like I feel like I still have a lot of work to do, right? Like I'm not saying that I'm the best and I'm not anywhere near the best. I'm not even close. Like if you put a list of announcers together, I'm probably like 17th on the list. I don't even know if there's 17 in the country, right? I still have so much to work on. And that's what the problem is with today's age, man. Like you go to that first race at East Bay, people are expecting to hear, you know,
Yeah.
Johnny. They're expecting to hear Brian Holbert. They're expecting to hear, you know, Ben Shelton. They're the best guys, right? I'm not. I had 7 or 8 wing races in my entire life, and I hadn't announced more than 10 races in the last 3 years, right? It was a huge gamble from Brad and Kyle to bring me on. And, you know, from what they said, and hopefully they're not lying to me, but they say that I'm doing a pretty good job and they're happy with everything, right? But yeah, it's just been a huge adjustment for me this year. And I feel like every race, you know, Tony and I are getting a little bit better. The whole crew's getting a little bit better with flow and with high limit, but I feel like I am improving maybe just a little bit at each and every race. And hopefully by the time next year rolls around that, you know, we'll be dialed in, we'll be good to go and not have any, you know, issues pop up here throughout a race night. But I just feel like I've become more prepared, more confident. And yeah, I feel like those are 2 pretty important things.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Do you hate Tony Laporta getting compliments? I know I do.
Compliments.
Yeah,
Like,
on social media. Isn't it terrible?
oh yeah, I hate him. Yeah, no, and the funny thing is, everybody thinks that we hate each other. Like some guy
No,
walked up
stop
to
it.
us. I'm dead serious. Some guy walked up to us. I can't remember what track. He's like, "Do you guys actually like each other, or do you guys actually hate each other?" And I was like, "No,
What?
that's like part of the act. Like we don't act, but like you know, we
Yeah.
just make fun of each other the whole time." And that's what you know. That's something that I've said a lot this year. Is if you're gonna watch a high limit broadcast, like we're gonna have fun. We're gonna mess around with each other, where we know when to be serious, right? We know when it's time to be serious. But I feel like we're in the entertainment business, and people want to be entertained. They don't want the run of the mill,
Right.
same thing each and every night, right? Like throwing in some humor and some comedy in there. And obviously, you got to try and balance that out correctly. But I feel like Tony and I have been able to do that. And that's what one of the main things that people are saying is just we have a really good rapport. We have a good, combination together of us, making fun of each other, and Tony doing his stuff in the infield, whether that's riding a school bus or jumping in a lake or whatever it is, right? I just think that we have a really fun thing going on right now. And that's the main difference for me when you go from watching a Highland broadcast to an Outlaw broadcast.
Right.
And no knock on Connor or Johnny, but I feel like if you had to take it and watch a flow broadcast versus Highland versus Dirt Vision, you're not going to laugh nearly as much as you would if you're watching that flow broadcast. You're not going to chuckle at something funny that Tony said or did or whatever, right? The Outlaw guys are very, very serious at all times.
Formal.
And that's kind of how I was. I did have my funny moments in there, driving push trucks or, jumping in that canoe or, things like that. But I just feel like when you watch our broadcast, there's just a lot more fun going on throughout the night when there's downtime or whatever it is.
You can admit you hate Tony. It's okay. No,
Yeah,
I'm kidding. I had
hate
Tony. I had Tony on a deep dive. I think he does a really good job. I'm glad he got another opportunity. And the rapport between you two, how did it help that you were a pit reporter so you understand the position he's in? And did that kind of help the chemistry / when to go to him and when to use him?
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah. I mean, I think that me being a pit reporter certainly helped with our rapport and me knowing when to throw it to him in certain situations. And, for like our like strategy, or not strategy, but our style of pit reporting, as I mentioned, is way different. Like I was a lot more statistical, analytical, that type of thing. I did have some humor in there, and he's a lot more personal, right?
Yes.
And like for me, when I was the pit reporter, I didn't feel like I wanted to jump in and interrupt Johnny or interrupt what's going on a bunch, right? I just felt like that wasn't my place. Like if it's time to go to the work area and I'm down there, okay, let's do it, right? If it's time for an interview, okay, send it to me, let's do it, right? I'm not jumping in and trying to assert myself into the broadcast just because I feel like that wasn't my place to do it. But the way that Tony does it, I feel like it works very, very well. I don't know, he's very experienced, right? He's way more experienced than I am. He's worked for so many different companies and things like that. And, we're about the same age, but he's worked for so many more different broadcast companies and race organizations and all that stuff, right? That I feel like he knows that position way better than me. And he knows when it's the right time to jump into the broadcast. And I love what he does because it gives me a little opportunity to, drink some more water and kind of cool it for just a minute. And so I feel like that people have enjoyed our dynamic all year long, right? Of how we go back and forth, how we talk about certain things that are going on in the racing world and whatnot. So I think he's been a fantastic addition to the broadcast. And I kind of, I'm not going to take full credit for it, but I told Mike Hess at the beginning of the year that, our pit reporter, I want them to be somebody that is fun and energetic and wants to be there and will put 110% effort in every single night and will have fun with it. And I knew that Tony, with his last gig, how it ended, he is going to be giving 150% effort every night to be the best and try and be the best. And I think so far he's done that. He's doing the research, he's doing the notes, he's doing everything he needs to do to learn about the cars and the drivers and the teams and the tracks. And then on top of that, he's got that great personality that he could take his personality and get personality out of the drivers and the crew chiefs and stuff like that, right? And I think he's done a fantastic job this year. And I honestly couldn't see, I don't know who else I could pick to be in that position to be my broadcast partner right now. I can't think of anybody else. I just think he's doing a really good job.
I agree. I just have to bust his chops because
me too. Well, we have to, right? I mean,
it's Tony.
And he does it to himself. It's like, we're driving down the car, or not driving down the car. We're driving down the road in the car, and people, you guys actually travel together? I'm like, yeah, we only have one rental car. It's me, him, Brian Walker, Anthony Carey. It's all four of us all the time in the car. I'm like, wow, I can't believe that. But it's like when you travel with somebody that much, you're gonna learn some things about them, and you're gonna be able to use that against them later on in a broadcast or whatever. And his thing is he makes fun of himself already because he thinks he's ugly and he's got no hair and he's fat and all this stuff, right? That's his joke about him. He's like, oh, I'm going to McDonald's. I might as well order 4 cheeseburgers, huh? And like he brings it upon himself, just make fun of himself. And so if he's going to do it, we're all going to join in and make fun of him too, because I feel like, if you bring that upon yourself, it's, what am I supposed to do? Say, no, you're not fat, Tony. No, you're not fat.
You're not dating him.
What's that?
You're not dating him.
No, absolutely not.
So
no.
I got to ask you about a 2-man booth. I talked to Johnny Gibson, had him on the deep dive as well, and he said he prefers a 2-man booth. And I know for me, when I do a podcast, I have Ryan Hand, obviously, and I like that because you can riff off each other. You've done a few, obviously, by yourself. You've had broadcast partners up in the booth with you. Do you like having that second guy there? Does that kind of make you go, kind of take a deep breath and relax a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. If we could have a second guy up there every night, obviously that's a big expense, but man, I feel like that would elevate. I mean, if it's dirt vision or flow, whoever gets a second announcer there in every single race, I think it would be a huge addition to the broadcast, especially if it's like in my dream scenario, right? I would love to have a driver from this, recent era of sprint car racing, like a Dominic Scelzi, who's already shown that he can do it, right? Imagine Flow Racing High Limit had Dominic Scelzi as the color commentator every single race. That would be a huge, huge addition to have that insight, to have that knowledge. He's been around the country to all these different racetracks, and he's raced the car recently, right? He's been in a sprint car recently. Right. I don't think he's going to give up his sprint car racing career right now, obviously, but man, I dream of the day that happens because, I'm a huge hockey fan, and I have this website that I use to watch any broadcast I want. And I always pick the games that I think have the best broadcast team, best color guy, best play-by-play guy. And I think that after watching so much hockey here recently, I just think it's such a huge addition to have a second guy in the tower, right? So when I get Blake Anderson up there, obviously he's fantastic. He's done it for a long time. And I thought we worked together really well. And he's always very energetic and he's happy to be there. And he knows obviously a lot about the racing scene. I had Caleb Hart up there at Skagit. I had Brad Kennedy there at Tulare. I've had, Chris Moore at Utica Row. I had a bunch of guys this year step up there and help me out. And that's a little bit different. If I were to have a Dominic Scelzi there, it'd be me doing all the play-by-play and then kind of going to him, if a wreck happens or under a yellow or whatever, right? But you have a second guy there that can call the race. That, takes a huge load off my shoulders as well. And you don't hear the same guy all night, every day for 50 races a year.
Different voice.
Yeah, different voice. And I think that it kind of just, makes it a little bit more diversified. And I think people don't get tired of, the same voice each and every night. I'm not sure if they do already, but I'm just saying, I think it would just add another layer to the broadcast. And I'm hoping that Flow and High Limit can be the first ones to, pay a guy to be there every single race, because I think it would be huge, just an absolutely huge deal to have basically like a professional sport. Every professional sport has 2 guys in the tower. Yeah. Why? Maybe we should do it too.
You won't have any room in the car though. That's
no, we'd have to get a big SUV, an Escalade every race.
Has there been anybody you've been able to lean on through this process who maybe you've been able to call and say, hey, bounce ideas off of, maybe work on your craft as well?
Yeah, I mean, Blake Anderson's probably been the guy that I have talked to the most throughout the year, just with certain things, whether that's, how to fix my voice, how to make my voice last longer, and certain things like that. I've texted Tony Bachhoven quite a bit as well from Knoxville. I've texted with Troy Hennig from Silver Dollar. Bobby Gerald every now and again, he'll send me a text about something. And Johnny, when I left the Outlaws, Johnny was obviously happy for me for my new, career and all that stuff, right? I haven't really talked to him a ton about, how to be better and what to do different. He hasn't watched the High Limit shows. He's always on the road with the Outlaws, so it's hard to do that. But, he was happy for me when I got the job and all that stuff. But I guess I would say the guy that I've leaned on the most this year has got to be Blake Anderson, who, if it wasn't for him not doing his thing, going to Skagit, doing that whole thing, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. He'd probably be the guy doing this job, right? So, yeah, I'd have to say he's the number one. And then there's a couple other announcers around the country that I've, texted with a little bit here and there for some different advice and whatnot.
So you guys are kind of in the midst of this string of big shows. You had Gold Cup, then you have Skagit, then you have the Tuscarora 50. And good luck selling that last night of the Tuscarora 50 because it wasn't good. Not your fault, but just saying.
Yep.
But now you come and you have another $50,000 to win show. Is it when you have a string of races like this that are higher paying, the intensity's up, the energy's up, bigger crowd, and you compare that to, let's say, just a regular night, is it hard to kind of keep that same enthusiasm the whole way through it, not get too high, too low, and kind of bring it every night? Because again, I've talked to other announcers, and sometimes those big events, I mean, it's difficult to keep that same trajectory of enthusiasm when it's just an ordinary night compared to a big race.
Yeah, it is tough. And like you said, right now we are on a crazy stretch of just incredibly high paying races. I mean, I feel like for the last 3 or 4, almost a month, we've been having a big race every week, which is crazy to think. I mean, we start off that West Coast swing with a 25,000 to win, then 20,000, then 100K, then 100K, then 57 or whatever it was, and now 50. I mean, it seems like every race with high limit has become almost every race has become a big race. And like you said, it is tough to find that balance of, when we go to a single night show, like when we go to Florence, right? I mean, that's going to be a normal $12,000 to win show compared to the Tuscarora 50, compared to Skagit. And it is tough to keep that same tempo, I guess, as an announcer, right? Because I want every show to feel big from my position, because there's a lot of people in the grandstands that night that are only there to see that race all year. They don't see high limit the rest of the year. They may watch on Flow, right? But I want those people in the grandstands to feel like they are at a big race, and because they are. I mean, we're a national touring series that has 16 full-time drivers, right? I mean, that is an absolutely monumental deal. And I think that I want everybody to enjoy the race and enjoy the commentary at the track as much as they would even if they were at the Joker's jackpot at Eldora, right? But when you go to these big races, man, when you have as many as we've had, you gotta step up a notch, right? You gotta be a little bit more excited, right? Or a little bit more, that tempo's got to be a little bit higher, because the stakes are so much higher for these drivers, right? I mean, they're racing for some very serious money every single weekend, it seems like. So, and I've kind of got some different, like music and things like that help add to at least in my opinion, it seems like it does. Like, I've got these 2 songs that I use for the big races. I got this one called a 300 Violin Orchestra, which is the one when they're pacing around.
Yep.
And it's like these like super I don't know, it's like it sounds like Beethoven type of music, but it really amps it up. And then I got this other one that is that Kerncraft 4000 when they go 4 wide. And it's the sound of a crowd just go, kind of making these noises. There is no singing. It's just like these guys. It's the same song as the Boston Bruins goal song, and a bunch of other stuff. But like, just trying to get that hype, right? Because when you have as many races as we do that are high paying, you want to make sure that they're all special in their own way. And I think that everything you could do if it comes to music or sounds or the announcers or whatever, driver intros, like, you got to try and put your best foot forward to make it seem like a huge deal, because it is. I mean, it doesn't matter how you put it. And I think that we could improve a little bit to make these shows, even better, especially with driver intros. That is something that it's tough to make happen, look good, not only for the people there at the track, but at home on Flow. I think driver intros are great. I love them. I think it gives the driver an opportunity to show a little bit of personality, get their, sponsor names out there. Everybody can see their face, what these drivers look like, because when they're in their car, obviously you cannot, right? But I think that we have some room to improve on things like that to make these events even bigger than they already are. Maybe we need to start getting some smoke machines and some tunnels and some spotlights and stuff like that to make them even bigger. But as an announcer, man, it is tough to every single week have a big race and continue to make them feel like a big race, because that's what your job is, man. And for me, I'm still learning. And that's maybe the other tough thing is like, I'm still learning how to maintain that tempo on a week to week basis and not lose my voice, number one. And number two, make each one sound just a little bit different from the last one. I don't want to be that guy that's in the same repetitive and doing the same exact thing every single week. I want you, when you turn on the broadcast, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what I'm going to say. You don't know what Tony's going to say. I try and do different things, and I have a bunch of ideas, and Mike Hess hates me for all my ideas because number one, they cost money. Number two, they take time. And number three, he just thinks I'm an idiot, right? And every time I see him, he flips me off, but that's fine. But I mean,
Mike.
exactly right. But I just have a lot of ideas, and I try to implement those into my announcing or into my music that I use or whatever it is, right? So, and I think that so far this year we've had a lot of success, and I feel like I told this to Brad at Port Royal. I feel like right now, High Limit, where it's at, is way, way higher on the like the, what do you want to call it, the totem pole, as far as like the momentum that we have, right? I feel like it is way higher than anybody expected in our first year with High Limit. At this point, nobody expected us to be growing this much and have this much hype behind us.
The Raudman Report. What made you start that? The whole whiteboard thing on YouTube, was it just a case of taking advantage of the YouTube and trying to promote the series, or what was your motive for doing that?
Well, like I said, I like hockey a lot, and there's a guy that I watch a ton on YouTube. His name is the Hockey Guy, and he does the same thing, right? It's a whiteboard. When I first started when I first got into hockey, I was always into YouTube, but like when I first got into hockey, I was like, okay, who do I want to watch on YouTube, right? Like, who are these guys? There's a bunch of hockey creators out there, and I watched him for the first time. I was like, man, this guy's like, man, I don't know, this whiteboard. What I mean, his handwriting sucks, and why do I feel like I'm in middle school again? And this guy's like, I'm not trying to, call anybody out here or anything, but like, it's a middle-aged guy that you'd see walking down the road and not thinking anything of him, right? But then you look and he's got 300,000 subscribers. His videos are all getting 30,000 views. I mean, it's a big deal. And I started watching him more and more. I'm like, man, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's got all these stats. He has the knowledge of the players and the teams and all that stuff, right? And I feel like I kind of have that as well. I feel like I have a lot of knowledge about the drivers and the teams and the tracks that we go to. I've been to obviously a bunch of tracks when you're on the Outlaw Tour. And I kind of have that insider knowledge, I guess, from being in the trenches at every race with High Limit and with the Outlaws. So I can get some news stories every now and again, like the Parker Price Miller one that happened last week. But then, I was like, I wanted to do it. But then when I was at the Outlaws, I tried to do it and they didn't really like it. They didn't like that it wasn't, content that they could not monetize, but that they could monitor and get on their on Dirt Vision or on their YouTube side of things, right? So they kind of shut me down on that. And so I was like, well, I guess there goes my YouTube career, right? But then when the High Limit deal came around, I asked Brad, I was like, hey, do you mind if I do this YouTube thing? And he's like, I don't care what you talk about, what you say, whatever you do, whatever it is, it's going to be good for the sport, right? Whether that's for High Limit or with the Outlaws. And I was like, man, that is awesome to hear, right? So then I started doing it. And at the beginning, kind of like I was with that hockey guy, I was like, everybody on social media was like, what a whiteboard? What is this guy doing? Because nobody had ever seen the other guy, right? And then the more and more I've done it, man, like it seems like
the people like it.
People like it, right? I mean, it's very simple. I have no editing at all experience in my entire life, right? I do it in one take. If I mess up, I mess up, right? And I just try and keep on going. Everything is done in one take unless I really screw up, then I redo it again, right? But I try to provide some good statistics and analysis and things like that, and people seem to like it. And I feel like there is a big hole missing, right? If you look at NASCAR YouTube, there are so many NASCAR YouTubers that are doing stuff like kind of like what I'm doing, right? And there's just not that much for sprint cars. Like obviously I would say you're the main guy for sprint car only stuff. Fiedler, obviously he does a lot of sprint car stuff, but he's a light models, the big blocks, all the stuff, right? Fiedler's the number one dirt racing channel for news like that. You are the number one sprint car thing, right? And, you do the 99. I watch those all the time. You do these deep dives, you do your podcast, you have all your exclusive stories on your website, right? But I feel like, there is still some room for more people to do stuff like that, right? And I see this hole, and I feel like I see sprint car racing on the climb when it comes to popularity. And so far, man, I've got like 3,500 subscribers, which I thought would take forever to get to. But you know, the reason I started in the first place is I see the opening there for it, right? There's nobody else doing it besides you, Fiedler. I can't even think of another one, right? I mean, Tanner Holmes, but that doesn't really count. He's doing vlogging
Right.
style, you know, dirt track stuff, right? So I don't know. I'm. It's been fun. The journey's been fun. I have 3 whiteboards piled up over here now. I've got a bunch of magnets and stuff. You know, I got all this like sitting right here next to me. Here's a Tanner Holmes one. I got the Dylan Sis one this weekend. I got Danny Dietrich right here. You know, so this weekend at that port, I actually went through the vendor area and bought a bunch of new stickers from like Sisney and who else? The 69K, you know, Deweese, all those guys. I went over and bought a bunch of stickers to use for my whiteboard, right? But it's a very, I don't know what's the word, just very bland way to do things. But I think people like the simplicity of it.
Yeah, it's basic and it's to the point. It's quick. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. You're not going on and on. I know from my standpoint, that's the point of the 989. It's quick. It's like a
Yep.
cup of coffee. So,
Yep.
do you find that that has helped you in your announcing because it makes you, let's face it, for the Raudman Report, you have to come up with certain things to talk about. It's longer form. I mean, you're not going to go on for 15 or 10 minutes on a topic on air. So I know for me, I think the 90 at 9, even the deep dive has helped just bring me back to my NFL days when I interviewed guys. It's made me better. Do you think the Raudman Report has made you a better announcer?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Tremendously has helped me because, you know, I also, like I said, I love the stats. I love the numbers, but I also love the history of sprint car racing and racing in general. Right. And I did a bunch of videos when I first started. One of my main series that I did was doing career videos for all of the guys that were on the old Outlaw 2002 video game. Right. I did a career video for all of them. And I learned so much doing those videos and researching them, and I had no idea. I really didn't know who Brian Paulus was. I didn't really know who Jeff
Right.
Shepard was. I did these videos, and I know these guys they're all old school and right. They don't race anymore. Paulus kind of does still, but a lot of them don't race anymore, right? But like the fact that I can still like remember in my head, like in a broadcast, hey, we're here tonight at Lernerville. Oh, yeah, you know, I'm just making something up. But like Jeff Shepard, yeah, he won the 1994 Silver Cup or something,
Right.
right? Like, I just feel like when you have all that, it doesn't hurt. There's no way it can hurt, right? And I remember, like when I did a video last week. Here's a perfect example. I did a video about Brad Sweet and him having a 35 race winless streak or winless streak, 111 days, blah blah blah. I did all the research for that video. The very next day, we were at Port Royal and he won. And
Right.
on the final lap, I said, "In Brad Sweet, it's 112 days, 35 races. May 16th, his last win. He gets it done tonight at Port Royal for the first time in 9 years, right?" Like I used that video directly into a race call, right? So I think there's no way that it hurts. I think it honestly helps me a ton. You know, like I did a video earlier this week about the battle for the those last 2 charter spots with
Right.
High Limit. And I didn't realize until I did the video that I'm looking at it over here off to my left, but there's 65 points between 4 guys, right? And I would have noticed that unless I did my video more than likely. And now I'm going to use that when we get to Lernerville this weekend and the rest of the year. I'm going to be focusing in on that because of making a video about it, right? So I don't know. I love doing it, man. I like it's so funny. Like I spend a lot of my time doing those videos. I spend a lot of my time getting ready for the next race for High Limit. And honestly, for like the last 2 weeks, I have been messaging so many teams, drivers, and whatever to try and get their little number font that they use for their race
Yeah.
car so I can add it to my whiteboard and add magnets and add all that type of stuff. And it's been fun, man. I have a website I use called stickeru.com to make these magnets. And in my cart right now is like 42 numbers. I'm waiting to get to 50 to make an order for them. But yeah, it's been fun to collect all those and the YouTube community. I don't know if it's the same for you, but it seems like they're just happy to see sprint car content on
Yeah.
YouTube. Right. And that's kind of one of the
Yeah.
main things. Like every time I post, man, thank you for doing this, your videos. I love them. I just love hearing about sprint car racing. People are craving more content. And
Yes.
if you and I can provide that for them, then why the hell not? Why wouldn't we do it? You know?
I thought the magnets was a good touch to it. You didn't have them during the year. I like them. I thought that was
Yeah.
it was just because you see the magnet and you see the writing. It's
Right.
it's just a kind of a,
It's so like kind of, I don't know if dumb's the right word to like, it's just their
it's
number.
just
But like people know drivers by their number,
correct.
especially if it's their font or their colors or whatever. I mean, I even got these ones for Knoxville. I used this in my Knoxville Nationals recap. I bought this at Knoxville Raceway. It's a magnet with their track on it. Next year I'm probably gonna try and get a bunch more track magnets,
Sure.
Eldora or whatever, just bring in some more color to the board, some more things that are kind of popping out and people that can, look at them and make it a little bit more appealing to look at. I'm not going to go away from the whiteboard. Somebody commented on my videos the other day. They're like, oh, this is just temporary. He's going to go to what? I'm like,
Nope.
no,
Don't do
I
it.
don't know how to edit. I don't know how to, I use my phone. My phone is my video camera with a tripod I got from Temu.com. My microphones are from Temu.com. They were like $8, right? That's my whole setup cost me like maybe, I mean, not including my phone, it's probably like $50 with my markers and all that stuff. I don't plan on doing anything different because I've seen success with that hockey guy. He's doing just fine, right? I feel like I can not replicate it because sprint car racing is not anywhere on the same level as NHL, but I feel like, it could be successful. We've already seen it once.
Yeah. I mean, people know you for the whiteboard. Don't go away from it.
And some guy's like, we're going to see the whiteboard in the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame one day. I'm like, I don't know about that, but that's kind of funny comment.
You never know. So,
Yeah.
well, Chase, I want to thank you for joining us on the show. I know you have research to do for Lernerville. Want to save your voice as well. I don't want to contribute to that. So Brad and everybody will be mad at me. But again, I appreciate you coming on the show. I know it was kind of short notice, and I might see you at Lernerville on Saturday. You just never know. So again, I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Jeremy. And hopefully we do see you Saturday. And hopefully this time I don't slide in front of you for an interview like I did at the Knoxville Nationals. I still
It's
felt bad
fine.
about it.
Nah, it's fine. Hey, look, it's really fine. It's okay.
Well, Jeremy, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. That's going to wrap up this edition of the SprintCarLimited.com deep dive presented by EnTrust IT Solutions. Thank you to Chase Raudman for being on the show. A lot of good stuff there. Also, if you like the YouTube channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also, check out our daily exclusive content at www.sprintcarlimited.com. And we'll be back next week with another edition of the deep dive.